like public comment.
Okay, we'll bring the outreach committee meeting to order. And let's find out who's on the phone.
Jake Gust.
Jake? Jake, do you want to know who's here?
Oh, that's okay.
All right. We're all here.
Mike Thorstead, West Fargo.
Rick Steen, Cass County.
Kevin Campbell, Clay
Kevin
County.
Go ahead, Rocky.
Sure. Okay. So red light here means you're talking. Green light up there means you're talking. Just
All right, well, we're going to, first item on the agenda is the minutes. We have a motion to
approve the
approve.
minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Next item is the North Dakota Legislative Update and Tracking. Rocky.
yeah, I want to draw your attention to a second page of your agenda there. It's what we call a tri-fold. It's not folded for you yet, so if you'd like to fold it, you can see what it looks like. But it's a tri-fold, and it is printed upside down, so I apologize about that on the backside. But this is what we've been using with different groups that have asked us for information or legislators that have asked us for information. This needs to be updated now, but I took this time to sort of show you what we're using. You may have seen this, but for those who haven't, it's a good little refresher on the project, finances, and legislative bills that are most related to the project. And I guess to give you an update, I thought it was easiest to use this. If you look at sort of the back side where you have a listing of 5 different bills on sort of which ones are supportive, which ones opposed based on project perspective. The 2 bills that are opposed on there relate to eminent domain. Those were both defeated on the House side or one was on the House, one was on the Senate side. This is good because in North Dakota, just for a little refresher, once you defeat a bill, it's generally dead. I mean, there's always ways to revive things, I guess, but how it happens is you have Senate bills and House bills, they get voted on. If they get defeated, they don't cross over to the other chamber. And so right now, we just finished a period of the last couple days called crossover, where all the bills cross over. And so what this means is these sort of maybe procedural items that we had been advocating against changes to the to the Century Code, we don't have to worry about those in the second half. So really our focus in the second half of the session is going to be on funding, which is the first bill on there, the 2020, that's the main water funding bill in North Dakota. We had some success there, not as much as we maybe have hoped for, but the state legislature did agree to additional funding for 2 more bienniums of $66.5 million. $130 million is tough to, say you weren't successful, but we asked for 300 and over 3 bienniums. So there's a little bit of work to do there. I would just add maybe a little more information to that. There's a new forecast that's coming out in March, and the last forecast, I think, is generally seen as a low forecast for the amount of money that they're getting from oil revenues, which then feeds into the Resources Trust Fund that funds water projects. So the new forecast in March, we're hopeful that oil production has been up since then. The price has been higher than the original forecast, so we're hoping the pot is bigger. And so there hasn't really been a infighting between projects on who gets what money at this point. They've kept it in one bucket for flood projects, and I think we're all hopeful when the bigger pot comes, there'll be more money. But I think there's a lot of work to be done. I think you saw a press conference last week that talked about maybe some other funding options out there at the legislature. But that's generally where we're at legislatively. There's a couple other bills on there related to items that I can cover if you're interested, but otherwise they're on the sheet.
Were there other projects that were cut in funding also on requests, or?
So how the funding works is all the projects are asked by the governor's office, the State Water Commission, to submit what their request is. And then the governor provides a budget to his State Water Commission that they vote on and approve, and then the legislature makes changes to that. And so when you talk about has anything been cut, it's sort of, well, where in the process are you asking that question? I think there were several projects that didn't get as much as they asked for from the State Water Commission. And then the legislature took the budget from the State Water Commission and separated it into sort of 4 buckets. We're looking at the flood bucket. The flood bucket's 145 million. That generally includes 3 projects: the Diversion project, the Minot project, and the Cheyenne River project. Our project alone was asking for 166. Minot's original ask, I think, was for 186. Maybe don't quote me on that, but it was somewhere in that range. The governor's budget had them at 70 million. And so, I mean, if you add those up, obviously, the Cheyenne River, I can't remember that, but that's in the $10 million range. So when you start to add those up, it obviously is a lot more than 145 million. The other buckets generally aligned with what the governor had for those projects that ended up in those buckets. So the flood bucket is short of the need.
Any other questions on any of these other bills? Okay, Rocky, thanks for that. Minnesota legislative update.
So also in your packet is a bill that, I don't know the date of it, but it was dropped or introduced in state of Minnesota for $39 million for Moorhead's flood protection efforts as complementary to the diversion project. I think you also see a letter in there that the Minnesota leadership has sent, the chair of Clay County and the mayor of Moorhead sent to, you see a number of Minnesota officials. Really, that was sort of the official diversion funding request that we could point to and say, you know, this is what our financial plan asked for. This is Minnesota following up on that as what they can. I think one important thing in Minnesota is, you know, we're unable to really ask or receive money for a project until it's permitted. And I think that's always been you know, it's different than how North Dakota works. And so that's always been a confusion point as we went through the process as we're waiting for the money. We probably are going to still wait for a little bit here until these other issues are resolved before we really get into that. And I don't know exactly the process that this bill follows through. I know the governor introduced a bonding bill, and bonding bills are generally on even number years. And so the bonding bill is not the main bonding one, and I asked if this bill would get wrapped up in the one that the governor provided, and it's really up to the legislature how they want to deal with it. So it's something that, you know, will have to get monitored and tracked through the way.
Wasn't there some additional money put in to defend the DNR's decisions?
Yeah, that's a good topic. As they have in the past, the DNR has to ask for money to defend its decisions. I think in the past they've asked for money to defend the permit denial for the project. This year they've asked for money to defend the permit decision, you know, issuing a permit for Polymet for this project and for a couple others as well. I can't remember how much money it was, but it was somewhere in like 6 to 8 million, somewhere in that range.
I think I read it was 6.
6 million?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that you should take that as, I mean, the DNRs, they're pretty, obviously we know, they're pretty serious when they defend their decision. I don't know if, Kevin, if you know more about this at all, or if that was sufficient.
No, you know, I think we, you know, we talked about the $39 million file. It's in the Senate file for the bonding. I think it's, you know, I think the letter that was sent to the governor and other legislatures and the commissioner of the DNR pretty much states, you know, we have a goal of reaching our $86 million, and this 39 million is part of that 86 million. The one good thing about this bill is that's in there. It's to address current issues, probably more within the city limits, but it still is part of this overall project. And I think the city of Moorhead, in a little bit in outlying areas, is more shovel ready, so to speak, than what we have with the tieback areas and those types of things. So now this is a good start. You know, I think we'll continue to go to St. Paul and you know, work hard to see these things through. I do agree with you, Rocky, that this is not a typical bonding year. So any types of requests that come through, it's not quite as easy but it's still important to get this in and get it on the docket and keep it on the radar. So hopefully we'll continue to see progress made there.
If I could
Rocky,
add
go
in, I did have one question on this money, and I asked Dr. Bob earlier today about it, and I think it was something he wanted to look into more too. But we're sending out, as later in the agenda we'll talk about, we're sending out a lot of letters to landowners upstream. I think there's 10 residences on the Minnesota side that we're sending letters to. Most of those are not needed until it's operational because of flow easements and others. But I think there are 2 that are impacted along the construction of the tieback levee. So they may want to move quicker and not. And so at what point is this funding, would it, if you receive it, is it available for land acquisition? Maybe
We would have to check with Dr. Zimmerman on that to see how that was put in. I would like to add for those who might be watching in terms of Minnesota and the way the funding works at the state level. Typically, these types of projects are handled through bonding mechanisms rather than through their general revenues or general expenditures. And and obviously any work or any dollars that are spent through the bonding bill have to also happen in the state of Minnesota, or in this particular case, it could go, I believe, towards the structure itself on the river. So we'll be monitoring all those things and what we can and can't do with the funds as we move forward.
All right, anything else from Minnesota? Partnership with MetroCog. That's for the recreation planning. Jason.
Right, good afternoon. So just a quick update on where we're at. MetroCog, through their process that we go through on most of the road planning projects, that they, their kind of standard process that they use is they form a small group to review the request for proposals, and then that group generally will sit in on the different firms that are vying for the work, and then approve who the firm is that's selected to do the study. So over the next couple of weeks, MetroCog is going to be working on a draft RFP, and Nathan Borboon and myself, as well as I've got emails out to other entities, Clay County, Moorhead, West Fargo. I did get a response from Horace that their new planner that's on board would like to participate in this as well. And so we'll make up the selection committee, and then once the firm is selected, I expect that's probably in the late April to May timeframe. At that point, then we'll develop a project review committee, and that project review committee will be the kind of the core group of both. It can be elected and non-elected folks that make that group up to carry the project through and identify public meetings, and then we expect that to be about a year-long project is what most of these MetroCog studies shoot for, and we can have some critical kind of midterm goals to get out of this as well. So if we want a few items for next fall, depending on how things are moving along with the P3, we can schedule that in. But right now we're working well with MetroCog, and they're excited about this project, and it sounds like they've been getting some phone calls from different firms that are interested in submitting proposals for this project.
Jason, I have a question. will this be part of the P3 contract and then also the core contract, or how does this work in conjunction with the two, the two
For the most
entities
part,
here?
it'll be constructed with the P3. There isn't a lot of recreational features that have been identified in the cores component with the southern embankment and the different Red River control and wild rice control structures. Most of the rec features are along the diversion channel, primarily trails on the inside, the protected side berm. And, there's, I think, really two goals out of this project are out of the study, and that's, one, identifying where there's shortfalls in the previous plan that was last done back in 2012, in making sure that we've got good connections with all the different growth and trail networks and recreational features that are in our communities now, and especially with West Fargo and Horace. But then also looking into the future so that we identify effective proposed projects and funding opportunities, because we know that we've got a certain amount of money programmed into the P3 that they'll construct as far as kind of up-to-date paved trail networks. Some of the other trail networks are going to be primarily just gravel maintenance roads initially. So, I guess generally the concept is that on the top of the inside berm, there'll be a trail network constructed by the P3 with undulations kind of going through that. So, but not necessarily the trail up there, just those undulations and the path, so that 5 years, 10 years down the road, as we get more money, we can extend those trails up there, and in those places we'll just have the gravel maintenance roads serve as a trail. But we know along the West Fargo and Horace area, we want to have a certain amount of paved trails right away. And so I see this study identifying, additional funding and being able to help us in applying for whether it's state rec trail money from the State Parks Department, or partnerships, because again, we haven't really dusted this off for 12 years, bringing in partners with the North Dakota Parks Department, bringing together all of the other regional, Fargo Parks, West Fargo Parks, and Horace, and identifying other entities that might be interested in tying in or participating or funding resources to build future rec areas, including, maybe the North Dakota Parks Department's looking at Red River State Park. There's not too many state parks once you get past really the Devil's Lake and south of Valley City. So there's different concepts that were out there back in 2012 for a campground or fishing docks, access points like that as well. So those are all things that would be nice to be able to identify, because none of that happens quickly. And while the P3 is constructing, project's done, 2-3 years later we can do another 4 miles of trails that are paved, and another 5 years later we're applying for more grants, and it's a trigger point for getting more funding or more support from North Dakota Parks or whatever it might be.
And all activity would be non-motorized? I had a snowmobiler ask me if there would ever be snowmobile trails on the diversion.
All of the features on the inside berm right now have been identified as just non-motorized. There was discussion And that's something I think that can be still looked at as far as on that outside berm, on what might be allowed. In comparison, I know like the Cheyenne Diversion, I don't believe allows snowmobiles in that. So, that might be, again, another opportunity for a partnership. There are snowmobile clubs that manage and groom trails, probably not on the inside of the diversion itself, but maybe on that outer slope of that outer berm. Those are things I think that, again, we want to look at and identify the best use of this. This is a 30-mile channel, and we want to make sure that people have access to use it for recreation.
Commissioner Stern.
Thank you, Chair. Say just a question, Jason. In this, we've got a number of firms proposing on coming up with this plan. Are they given any parameters, like in how much might we think about spending? I granted, said we're looking at future funding sources as well, but 5-10 years out. But what's contemplated in the P3 budget as far as recreational costs for the channel?
But I think, really what they'll do is look at several different scenarios. Right now, what's in the P3 is a fairly bare bones. Again, it's I think in that 5 to 6 miles of actual paved trails, and then everything else will be gravel with the opportunity to build paved in the future. And then most of the trailheads are pretty minimal as well. They're going to consist of a smaller gravel parking lot for 10 to 15 or maybe 20 cars, depending on the location, and then a vault toilet and a garbage can. So because we know people are going to stop and take their dogs for walks, go running, go biking, and they're going to park somewhere. So if we don't have some minimal parking spot, they're going to end up just parking and tearing up the ditch bottom or whatever. And the same thing with bathroom facilities. So having a relatively primitive vault toilet, but in the future, depending on how much these facilities are used, then I envision this plan that they would have, the proposers would, or the different firms would, identify triggers for future opportunities to grow and add features based on money. But the current P3 is fairly skinny dollar-wise on rec funding and components. So this is, I think, again, really identifying future things that can happen so that we can start applying for grants and other funding.
Commissioner Thorstad.
Yeah, Jason, you touched on it, and I think that's a very important that we make sure we engage the park districts and, of course, the state park system as well. I've talked with some of our park people in West Fargo, and of course, their concern is obviously who's going to determine what the facilities are, who's going to maintain them, and of course, how they integrate with our other systems, our existing systems. So I guess I'd just recommend make sure we engage them early in the process and don't come up with a plan and say, here you go, guys, let's run with it. So, and I think you've stated that's the intent, so.
Absolutely, right.
All right, thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Maybe just to add one thing, the reason it's on public outreach agenda, the recreation thing, is I think for that very point, when we've given presentations to all the civic groups and stuff over the years, 100 of those type of presentations, the recreation slide or two that we throw in there has always gotten a question. And people are always interested because I think when you see how often we really rely on flood protection, when you need it, you definitely want it, but for the rest of the year, it generally sits there. And so this is something they see as a daily benefit for what they're paying for sales tax on. So people are always interested. We get a lot of questions about it. And I think using MetroCog, we realized we could set up our own public involvement process. I think April always was a big advocate. We need to have like 3 alternatives and have people vote on them and that sort of thing. But what we thought is that's not really natural for the Diversion Authority to do. We have this recreational feature with MetroCog that's what they do. So using that expertise to try to get some public involvement from the other entities that maybe don't have a part in the diversion authority as a board or a committee be a good way to do it. So.
Any other questions? Land outreach activities, Wolverton, Comstock, and Christine.
Yeah, so there's a couple things under this one. This is probably the biggest outreach stuff going on right now. In your packet here, you have this kind of significant stapled thing graced by our chair as the front of this. But it's a packet of letters and maps that have gone out. There's actually a full packet that's much longer. If you're on the land committee, I think you'll get this one. And so there's a lot of different letters, but generally what the letters are is they're going to about 500 and some different property owners along the channel, along the southern embankment and upstream, slightly different based on what state you're in as well and what sort of feature of the project you're in. But that really starts the land acquisition process in a way. It provides a lot of information, makes sure everybody gets appropriate contact, provides maps, shows access to the website where there's all sorts of features, hoping they can answer their questions. We also have sort of a phone system set up for them to be able to call and ask their questions. And for those ready to move to the next step, we're ready to assign land agents and that sort of thing too. So it should be a pretty major effort. You can see on the screen there too, there's a letter to the editor that the chair wrote to was in the form. So that's been good. We expect those letters to be in the mail by the end of the week. Maybe took a couple extra days longer than we thought because we kept sort of subdividing the letters to try to make them specific to who gets them, and the maps need to be folded and that sort of thing. So people should be getting them this weekend or on Monday in their mailboxes. And then we should start hearing a lot. It'd be interesting to hear. I think we've always had these anecdotal things, but now when you send out 500 some letters, you're probably going to get a reaction. So I just wanted you to see what's in those. Of course, we're sending a lot of letters to a wide geographic area, and so one of the other things we're doing is contacting all the jurisdictions that have residents whose properties being sent a letter. So all the townships along the channel, the townships upstream, including the cities of Wolverton and Christine as well. And we're sending them what we've been calling jurisdiction letters that really is short and sweet that says, wanted to let you know that your citizens are being contacted. Here's why, here's the information they're getting. Be happy to meet with you further if you have more questions on it. The sub items on here are a little bit different. These are 3 identified upstream cities where we're taking an additional step with. Wolverton and Comstock, of course, they've filed for a contested case hearing with the DNR challenging the permit decision. Comstock we've met with a number of times. They are now we thought we solved most of their problems with the Plan B changes, but we've reached out to them as well. Mayor Judd has reached out to both Wolverton and Comstock to request meetings with them. We are following up with a letter that's more sort of specific to that request. So it's sort of somewhat separate from the lands outreach, but wanted to know there's sort of a parallel route with these 3. Of course, Christine on the North Dakota side will be reaching out to them as well. With Wolverton and Christine, there are impacts through the city, a number of properties, and I think there's 1 or 2 residences in each of those communities that are impacted. And Greg's here, so I don't want to get too far into this without calling him up here, but I think our general thought is that we can work individually with these landowners, but the better mitigation may be a community decision on how they want to handle it, especially in Wolverton where they have a greater existing flood threat. Instead of working with these individuals, is there a community solution that maybe could provide benefit to a greater number? And for the diversion authority, it would, the costs maybe wouldn't be all that much different to be able to provide help to the whole community versus a couple.
Greg, could you just talk to us about the impacts in Christine? Or, I'm sorry, in Comstock. I thought we were keeping them totally out. But didn't he say?
Hi, I'm Greg Thielman with Houston Moore Group, for any of you that don't know me. The information that was provided to the DNR as part of their permit application and also the Buffalo Reds permit application, there were some small impacts right along the dam within Comstock's city limits. And what we were able to do is, as we looked at it more, you have water that kind of breaks out of Overton Creek and flows to the Red, and that was getting cut off by the dam. There's also a parallel channel to the dam that'll convey water, and just with the level of detail that was in the modeling, it didn't have culverts along that channel, so we've since gone in and added those culverts, and those impacts will go away. So there has been some additional information, and I believe some additional outreach to Comstock that'll be done that shows there's really no impacts within that community. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, and then Wolverton, that obviously the creek goes right through town, or a
Yeah, and
drainage
I
channel.
believe there's 2 residential structures that are impacted in Wolverton. One of them is a mobile home and the other is a small home that are along that channel. Early on in the project, there was a ring levee concept that was developed for Comstock, or for Wolverton. There were some initial meetings with the community. They also had flood problems back in 2013 from a rainfall event that was much more damaging than what this project would cause, and I know the Buffalo has reached out to them over the years. But I think the intent is to kind of dust some of that stuff off and maybe reach out to the community again and show them what a ring levee concept that not only would mitigate the impact of this project, but would solve a lot of their other flood problems as well.
So one more question. The reason for their contesting of the permit or the DNR's decision are these issues that we're talking about, or is there other issues?
I can't speak to what's in their contest, but I believe a lot of it's driven by the fact that there are impacted structures in Wolverton, and that there were small impacts that were showing up within Comstock, but those have since been shown to no longer be there.
Right. Any other questions for Greg?
I want to comment, I don't really have any questions, but more of a little insight with, when it comes to Comstock, I did speak yesterday with another member of our county commission, and one of the things that we would like to certainly relay to Comstock, I know in the past there was maybe some interest in a little increased development within Comstock, and there needs to be a little bit of road work, and you know, part of what we should be looking at with them would be, you know, we're going to be misplacing a few people on the Clay County side, and like when we misplaced some of those property owners in Oxbow, we gave within the new area, we gave them, you know, a place where they had an alternative place to build or to move. And, you know, this could be an opportunity for Comstock. And so I think there's going to be some extra efforts to reach out in that regard as well with them. I can follow up. I know we've got other commissioners who might also be discussing that with the mayor of Comstock and see how that goes. But I think there's, you know, I think some of these communities, there's also opportunities, you know, through a project like this to also make some improvements. And so we're hopeful that we can shed some light with them on those positive approaches. So.
Thanks, Greg. Anything else there, Rocky? Any other comments on?
You know, I think it's just good for this committee to know that even since I think Mary's comments, the chair's comments last Friday at the press conference and the editorial, the people I know personally that are in the sort of buyout area have already contacted me sort of saying, okay, we heard you, what's the next steps? You know, and so I think there are eagerness, and I'm kind of, you know, anxious to see what response we get from these letters, because I think we've heard this. And so next month's report could be interesting to see where we're at in that process. I think we've all heard that the biggest issue with this project is these upstream impacts. And so if we can start mitigating them, hopefully that's helpful.
Mr. Chair. And Rocky, too, I think another area on the Minnesota side, I know I've brought it up and talked about it on several occasions. It's right now the project doesn't show as having impacts that area because of the upstream staging area, but I still think the ongoing efforts need to be dealt with Georgetown. I think we need to keep that dialogue open with Georgetown and look at opportunities for them as well. I know for those of you who might have attended the Buffalo Red River Watershed meeting it was brought up as a concern of the Buffalo Red Board, so I think it's important that we keep that contact going as well, and hopefully we can resolve any concerns that they may have as well, so.
I got one more question on outreach to townships. I know we have, over the past, and it's been a while, probably a couple of years since we've had one-on-one contacts with townships. Do we need to redo that again?
Yeah, so maybe a couple points. We've been working with a number of townships on MOUs along the channel for the P3 thing, so I think there's been pretty consistent contact with those townships. We did actually make efforts with all the townships, at least within Clay and Cass, after Plan B was sort of formulated and after the permit was submitted last March, so it's probably been a year, but we went out to, I think, most or all of them anyways, and presented on Plan B. I'd have to go back and check if it was all of them, but we did a lot of them. I know Jason did a number of them, and so I think we've done pretty good. I'll say, though, the two townships, Wolverton Township and the one in northern Richland County, we've never met with, and we're sending them a letter for the first time. And so that's good outreach.
And regarding the outreach for the MOUs with the townships, it's over the last 6 months, it's really kind of died down. We've had a little bit of discussion with Harwood Township, but once we get some direction here over the next month, I think it'll be good whether we know this contested case hearing is going to move forward, or if not, that we go out, do some outreach to those townships to just give them an update on where we're at and what they can expect. Because I think from their standpoints, they don't want to be sitting down and going back into the MOUs and doing a lot of review if things are still a little bit in limbo. They'd rather wait until things are solidified. But at least to keep in touch with them, and there's a handful of townships that it's a lot better if we go out and meet with them and kind of give them that update, whether they are, how interested they are in it or not, because at least it keeps them informed.
And then also with the Plan B, the towns like Argusville, has there been outreach to them to explain, any positive or negatives to Plan B or what it is for them?
Yeah, I think Argusville we did go to after Plan B. It's I think we always have the conversation about sort of where do you draw sort of the project boundary, is when you go to talk to different, do you talk to Mapleton or Castleton or Leonard, or, they're probably interested, but how much effort do you go into that, and how often when, our little narrow vision is they're not involved, but they are. And so I think some of that we rely on. The county has several meetings, township association meetings we've presented at, those type of things where we try to at least hit it on a grander scale, or Red River Basin Commission conferences, or the state water conferences, where maybe they can get an update if they're interested. But going actually to their councils or commissions, we probably haven't done a whole lot of. But we tried. But so maybe on that note, it's not on here because it was recent development, but Commissioner Campbell, if you want to update on our efforts next week.
Yes, we are planning. I'm going to be going before the Becker County and Otter Tail County boards next Tuesday, and I'm going to have the assistance, of course, of our technical staff and Rocky, and give both of those counties probably a long overdue update on our project, and talk to them a little bit about and what we know about how this project benefits both of those counties as well. So we're looking forward to that. That's we're on their agenda. Fortunately for us, it's going to work out well. We're going to be in Becker County in the morning, and then Otter Tail County is having their board meeting that day in Perham. So it's going to just be another extra 20 miles, and we're going to be seeing them at about 2:15 on Tuesday afternoon. So we're looking forward to that opportunity to update those boards on this project.
quick question. Rocky, have we had ongoing discussions with Horace? They had come out with a letter or something against the changes in Plan B or something like that.
Yeah.
Are we still having discussions with them?
I'd be happy to answer that. I don't know if Commissioner Sherling wants to answer that question, or if I'm going to call on Jason again. I'm
I
going
guess
to
I just
basically
want to make
update
sure
on
that
their
we're having
efforts.
dialogue with them, because obviously they had some concerns with the changes in Plan B and what it did to some of their extraterritorial area.
And there has been ongoing discussions, both Horace and Fargo and Horace with Cass County. On the Cass County side, we met about a week ago with a couple of their board members and heard their concerns, and looked at and kind of gave them an update on different infrastructure projects that the county is looking at or considering down in their area based on growth and new things happening with the school. And so we've agreed to come back here in another week and a half and sit back down and review that project list and kind of give them an update on what, not only what these impacts are to them, but what else the county is going to be doing based on growth and other challenges. And I know tomorrow night I plan to go out to Horace as well. They're going through their comp plan, and so this is the first time that they've done a comp plan in maybe 20 years or more. So there's a public meeting for that. So I think it's good to continue to stay involved with Horace and hear their concerns, and especially with the new middle school and high school going in there, I think there's going to be a lot of changes and growth in their area, and they're trying to stay on top of that and understand what's going on with the diversion.
I guess one other concern, and this was way back, the Kindred School District, and we did, present to them. Is there any reason to update information to them?
Is there a reason, Craig Hertzgaard, who's sort of been a longtime advocate of the upstream area, did testify in the Senate Appropriations Committee, and he used some statistics about the Kindred School District, some ones I had never heard before. I know he's since been at some meetings with other diversion supporters where they had a conversation about it as well, and so I think there's probably some information out there that could be used, be updated and informed, because Kindred School District, I think, is doing very well. It's a good school district. It's gone up in population. The value of the Kindred School District has dramatically increased, mainly or particularly due because of Oxbow's value of the city has doubled in the last 3 years due to the work through the diversion and the reassessment of the city. And so I think some of the arguments they used to make are definitely no longer valid. They've come up with some new ones, but so maybe it is a good reason. We haven't heard directly from the Kindred School District. I think we used to. Before, I think they, I think the Oxbow, as Commissioner Campbell said, we've added some development in Oxbow, which added more homes, more tax base, but presumably, an opportunity for more students. So I think some of that was we did purposely because of the Kindred School District, and so maybe we haven't heard from them for a reason, but it's never a good assumption. So, as I found with legislative activities or with the Buffalo Red Watershed District, sometimes these groups that you never thought you needed to talk to, Otter Tail, Becker County, become very relevant. In North Dakota side legislature, you have people out in Williston that sit on the right committee that say, this impacts me for such and such reason, and you're like, oh, didn't even realize that. So it's always amazing how broad the project is when we think it's just our little area of the map. So.
Well, I know the Kindred School District, the actual members did vote against actually the diversion. So they were supporting the upstream group. So I think it would be all right to put them on the list for an update, at least to make contact to see if they want any other information.
Make sure you know when that meeting is.
Pardon?
We'll make sure you know when that meeting is.
That would be fine. Item 6, fmdiversion.com launch.
Sure,
our new-
I'm gonna ask Tammy to come up here. We have a new diversion website. It's really just a modern format. We updated it, tried to time it around these lands outreach because we knew it was gonna get hit pretty hard, and if there was anything wrong with it, we knew these 500 folks we send a letter to will find it, so it's almost a good opportunity for that too, but we really wanted to make it more user-friendly for them, and maybe Tammy can run through a few things.
I sure can. I'm Tammy Joe. Yeah. So we launched it, and if you can't find things that you were able to find before in certain ways, just go to the search feature, and this is the #1 reason why we had to update the site anyways. The old platform, the search feature was breaking because it was an old system. Anyways, if you look on the homepage, we've moved the property rights information to kind of front and center because the letters are going out. And then everything else is kind of icons and clicking things like that. One thing that I think is kind of neat is this interactive timeline that goes all the way back to 1997 that shows how much work has been done on the project. And so it's kind of gives a really brief overview of all the work that's done. And then I don't know if this group has seen before, but we have this interactive web map that is part of the website. And if you look on the analytics, sorry, Rocky only printed the first 2 pages of your analytics report this month, but I'll email the full report. But our maps page is consistently one of the highest used pages of the website. So we know that that's a really consumed resource that we put out. And this interactive web map is a pretty neat thing where you can actually scroll in and see where the channel is and where the project is going to be, and you can take different pieces off and put it on and stuff. So this is also really great for presentations and school kids if you are ever doing a presentation or talking to somebody. And then one other thing I'll just note here, that we kind of get a lot of questions about how the project will actually work. And so we've restructured this about the project page if you've seen those pull-up banners that we have, we use those icons for the different project components. And so we've made sure that those are here and present on the website as well, and how it actually will work in a kind of a 6-step process. So it's a little bit different, it's structured differently than our old site. If you have questions or concerns, let me know, but it's a lot faster and it's a lot easier to search, and it's going to be good for the long haul for us. So, yeah.
And Tammy, there is a map showing land that we have purchased, is that right?
I don't know if that is on the interactive web map or not. I think that it is.
I thought I saw it in the first,
It was on the web map. I think there was actually a decision by our lands team, our brilliant lands team, to take off the public web map for this process so that it would be easier for those getting a letter to navigate through. And so, we have a web map that our lands team uses that's very detailed and has sort of every feature you could want. On the public one, we've tried to make it more user-friendly, and it's always a good discussion on what makes it user-friendly or whatnot. There's a lot of different options, ways to do it, but we think it's simple and user-friendly the way it is now, so it doesn't have that. I think you could find those previous land acquisition reports on here in past packets, so it's on here, but I don't think it's in the web map anymore.
And then one more thing, I don't know if this group has seen as well. We also added this township section where you can click on your township and it'll take you to kind of a zoomed in PDF of your township, and it'll show you the impacts of the property. So if you are talking with folks that are township officials, this is a good resource as well. So, yeah.
looks good. Any other questions?
Who's that young guy on the Diversion Authority on the front page with the glasses?
The one with the glasses? I think
That guy right there.
You know, we do have the capability to take updated photos if anybody would like.
That just shows what this project does to a guy.
Here's what he looked like before he was president, this way.
I like Jake's picture. It's the most natural up there.
All right, anything else there? Oh, number 7, 3 questions video by Chuck.
So this is a video that we did a while ago. Obviously, you can see it's summer. And then I don't think we ever showed it to the committee, so we'll show it today. If the audio works.
Yeah, this has been up, hasn't it, on the website?
We just, I think we just posted it in mid-January, I think. So it was ready to go. We just kind of, it didn't get published. But maybe the audio doesn't work.
They're closing hospitals and highways, and we were kind of flipping a coin, wondering if we should go back up to Rose Road and War Road and have the baby, or over to Fergus Falls. And we decided to stay put because they were closing every road except for the interstate, and that was next. And they were clearing out the hospitals. And you know, I wasn't for the diversion right away, but I started reading into it and started studying. And it is a good plan. It's the only plan that's going to work. And my wife and I had a long talk one night about what happened in 2009 and how worried we were that. You know, that we were going to have to leave home to go and have a baby. You know, I hear this whole thing that Moorhead's protected. We've got our own diking system, but, you know, we're not protected for the 500-year flood. And we might, well, have a 500-year flood. Like I mentioned before, Roseville had a 500-year flood, and it took out half the town. And, you know, Moorhead, North Dakota and the federal government are paying for most of the diversion. Moorhead is just paying a small amount, and we're getting protection. So I think that's a good deal. I think that, and I don't think Minnesota people realize that North Dakota and the federal government are fronting most of the financing for this. For future generations, this diversion is going to protect hundreds of thousands of people. And I don't know if my kids are going to, I got 4 kids, I don't know if they're going to stay in Fargo or Moorhead. But if they do, I want them to have that peace of mind where they don't have to go out and sandbag. I want, you know, the business community of Fargo Moorhead, they don't have to take workers out to go and sandbag. I want that peace of mind where, you know, they know it's happening, they know where the water's going, and it's just going to be a non-event. That's my goal, and that's what I hope happens.
We do have a sub-item on there about who's next or what's up next. We have a couple names we've been kicking around that we need to ask, and so I don't want to throw them out here until they agree, but if you do have some other good folks, I know a number of you have done it. If you're interested in doing it, Tammy does a really nice job capturing the narrative, I think. Some of this is, we're going to go try to find some maybe legislators or past local leaders that we can get sort of their perspective as past flood fighters.
All right, number 8, other business. Any other business?
I just have a question, Roger. Where are we in terms of plan or protocol regarding compensating for project impacts?
Want me to handle that one? Sure. So, you know, I think we have a pretty good process set up for structures that are impacted. You know, I think we have a lot of experience with that through the different entities, through the diversion project as well. We've acquired, you know, 200 properties or something like that to date. But for the farmland impacts, that is something that's still a little bit in the works. A lot of work has been done by the, you know, State of North Dakota commissioned a study with NDSU, the Diversion Authority commissioned a study with NDSU. We used a number of different sort of insurance companies along the way. We just finished phase 1 of a very large study with Crown appraisals to really get to how we're going to figure out what the impacts result in value-wise. And I think what they did is they built a database of resources to do that. We just started phase 2 with that company. And phase 2, my understanding anyways, is that phase 2 will take that database and then the parcels we're actually impacting, and at the end of the day, they'll spit out a number of what the impact actually is on each parcel we're impacting. So when we go out to need to acquire flowage easements, we have the data backed up through a robust process. But we're not there yet. We have some good estimates, for budgeting purposes and for public outreach purposes to talk about. But if you have a property and you want to know exactly what it is today, we're not there yet. I think a couple things to keep in mind is, we've been working hard on that, but it's a process that we don't need to acquire flowage easements until the end, but we're ready to start and hopefully be there soon. I see the chair's here if she wants to help answer.
I would just add that we're starting to work with ag producers as well, so we can figure out what exactly their needs are going to be. So it'll be a process, but we don't need any of that property, for 6 years at least. So we've got time to figure that out, but I know everybody's wants to know, but we're working on it.
One other good process we went through, I think probably because of the Minnesota DNR's process, the permit process, they moved up this a little bit, but they also wanted to really get into details about some of the maybe non-compensation programs that we're developing as well. So on top of what we're actually paying for a flowage easement, look at what we're doing to mitigate the cemetery impacts. We talked about a cleanup program, springs after it floods, how we're going to handle that. And so a couple of these other programs that maybe aren't direct compensation, but they're definitely related to the impacts and what we're doing about it.
I know we say that we're going to compensate them fairly and properly, but it would seem to me that if we knew the answers to that problem, it could resolve some of the nervousness on some of the property owners.
No disagreement.
One more thing, we did talk to some ag bankers. I don't know if you mentioned that, but we actually met with 3 different ag bankers back in January, and groups within their bank, and talked about the process and laid out what our proposal was to come up with what the easement was, the value of it, and they were very receptive, and they gave us feedback from their side what they would like to see, and so I think that was very helpful. And that was actually our second round of talking to ag bankers. A couple of years prior to this, we did reach out to I think it was 3 other ag bankers, and just to get their perspective and what the impact to that farmer or that landowner was going to be in their mind, or when they came to take a loan or whatever. So yeah, they're valuable, and I think we'll probably continue to talk to them. And all right, thanks for the question. Anything else? Mary.
One little item I wanted to mention to this group, that our emergency manager, Jim Prochniak, is going to be putting out a press release soon, hopefully, in coordination with the state on being ready for floods this spring. Not to be alarmist, but when we did have our flood in '09, I think we got heads up on that about the middle of March, and 2 weeks later, we were really inundated. So, the county is getting ready. We're, counting our supplies, and Jason's got a great plan, but I think that we all need to be aware that it's almost March 1st now. So if we do get into trouble, we won't know until, really, we don't get a whole lot of warnings. So just so you're aware from the public relations that we're going forward with that. Almost too late for people to get flood insurance, though, if they haven't already. I mean, not quite too late, but maybe. Thanks.
Right, anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same
Aye.
sign. Motion carried. Thank you.